I'm talking with Tobias today, who's been in Canberra for
on and off pretty much since the 31st of January 2022. I left after the first 6 weeks, went home for another 6 weeks, left on Mother's Day, walked up here, gone mid-June, back for 3 days to get my car, my papers, my phone, and since then pretty much living in Canberra.
Wow.
I went once back on just before Christmas for 3 days or for a few days, and standing here addressing the corruption in Parliament. The main reason why I came here was there was something wrong with vaccination to mandate us. So I thought it was unconstitutional, section 5123A, which was inserted in a referendum in 1946, I think, which states the parliament can make laws and rules towards the people in regards of, I shorten it a bit down, dental and medical services, but not to authorize any civil conscription. Any civil conscription, in my meaning, is you can't, in any way, can't authorize someone to do something, to force something. If you can't authorize it, how can you demand it? How can you make a mandate if you can't even authorize it? And then later on we have a High Court ruling saying it is not forced, it is a voluntarily medication. But then how can you lose your job if you not participate in a voluntarily medication? So something is wrong. And the more and more you learn, you're standing up for your freedom, you're coming here. I experienced discrimination, harassment from the police. We went after Epic when we got thrown out. As I might be under legal reasons. They take our authority away, they had the right to move us on, fair enough. But then if you're gathering on a car park designated for caravans, long vehicles to stay there, and a group of 10, 15 police officers, PSO, coming and say you have to move on, you're starting to learn the law inside. We have a move-on order in ICT or somewhere else. They can give you move-on orders to certain aspects, but not if you're picketing or speaking your democratic rights. They don't have any legal rights to move us on. Then there's 83.4 from the Criminal Codes Act. Anyone who is interfering with someone expressing their democratic rights can actually get jail term. So up here on the lawn, just in front of the Precincts Act, I stand up in my truth. We're demonstrating against the corruption. Police officer move you on with made up, remove tacit consent. You ask for evidence, they just arrest you. You go for court trials, extend, and the first time when it actually come to the trial, the prosecutor says, we have approval to go ahead. This approval, my presumption, was from the Attorney General, but it was not from the presiding officers, which is in the Precincts Act regulated. Any arrest in the precinct has to be in accordance with the presiding officer, which is the President and the Speaker of the House of Parliament. It comes to the day, final day, where it gets called. The prosecution says we're dropping every charges on top because lack of evidence. The more you stay here, the more you have to learn the law, the more you learn how corrupt the system is. The system is... The magistrate advised me to get legal advice for my case. Legal advice would be to plead guilty. If I would plead guilty, I would be charged maximum penalty maybe $4,500 around this. I plead not guilty, go self, and the charges get dropped. Each lawyer, to my understanding, solicitor, they have to stay in their guild, apply the rules and laws. They can't expose the corrupt system how it is. They have to cover themselves up. The director of the DPP can take, of the prosecution, can take over your case if you're self-representing, if he thinks you may be danger the jurisdiction. So they're covering themselves up. Today in court, we learned there was the defendant was there in presence or in video link with the lawyer. The registrar, who managed the pre-assessment before court, told to the defendant he's not allowed to talk because he has a representative, a lawyer.
Yeah, because he doesn't have one present, or
He had a lawyer present, and
yeah.
he's not self-represented, so he's not allowed to talk. So you as a defendant, you can't represent yourself, and the lawyer is bound by the rules and laws what he is a part of. So you need a license to practice law, and part of this license is that you stay in the regulations of the law. So how can you have a justified, unbiased law if even the magistrate is still a person, and him is a job, so he gets money to do this. He has a personal interest, and his personal interest is to make money. If he would expose the corrupt system where they're making the laws, and the laws what actually regulating are against some laws what they installed beforehand. So if he would expose the system, he would lose his job. So how can he be unbiased? Any magistrate who is working in the court is, in my eyes, biased because he has to apply by certain rules not to expose the corrupt system. Otherwise he loses his job. So he's compromised. That's things what you learn in coming up, and it makes no sense. I had another court case for driving with no authorization, with right remove to drive in Canberra. And this comes because I had infringement notices set out, and if you don't pay your infringement notice and you're from interstate, ICT can remove your right to drive. If you would be an ICT person, your driver license would be suspended, and the authorization to drive the car from any person will be suspended too.
so you can lose your license here in the ACT for having unpaid fines and things
No,
like
not
that?
fines, infringement notice.
Oh, infringement
The
notice.
definition of infringement notice is a fraction of a possible fine if you get charged in court. It's insensitive to have justice without court. So as soon as they have photo evidence for you breaching, it's deemed liability on the defendant to prove that he is innocent. But it's an infringement notice, it's a voluntary payment. You're not convicted. If you pay the infringement notice, to my understanding, there is no crime against you recorded, nothing. So it's a free pass. So if you have enough money and you have parking tickets, speeding tickets, you can pay your freedom out. You're not convicted. It's not no justice. Kind of a good system, but there's another act who says, in a different act, it's not in the same act, it's a different act, but it's road related. If you don't pay infringement notices, your right to drive get removed. What does this mean? So if you don't pay what we're asking you to, we're taking the right of your driver license away. This is blackmail. And in the guidelines from the Attorney General to make infringement notices, but the infringement notice should not be enforced in any other way. And taking your right away is being enforced. So it's the whole system is stuffed. If they would say instead taking your right away, you have to go for court to deal with the charges on the infringement notice, this would be justice because they're dealing with the matter. And now I got fined for driving with unauthorized to drive, the matter is still standing. That the infringement notice, the purposes why the infringement notice get installed is still standing. So I have another potential risk to get fined for this matter again. They didn't solve the problem, they're just raising revenue. It's not justice anymore. And from being unjustified treated, and now we had another court case, someone refused a drug test to stick something in his mouth, which he has body autonomy about it. And now, because on the tiny little things what they're writing in regulation, they're making laws about, he has the right to ask this and this. This person loses the right of body autonomy because he has a strong belief how the test is treated is poisonous to his body. He didn't refuse the drug test. He refused the way how to consent to drug test. There is different ways of drug testing. He was offering to spit in a cup, give blood samples, urine samples, everything. But because how they are mentioned in creating the laws, they have any right to do so. They're not going on morally, humanly rights. No, they're just creating deficiencies. So yeah, that's the why now I'm here and to stand up for the kids.
Yeah.
Any right what we give away, what we experienced, our kids never will experience.
Yeah.
A lot of people say, why don't you stay home and supply food for your kids? That's the main reason why I came here, because that took my right away to work and supply food for my family. And if you don't stand up and speak your voice, they're thinking everyone accepts the laws what we're making. And we seeing now from history, from the past year or 2 years, if people speaking up against the law what they want to introduce, say 50-minute cities, saying digital currency in community installments. If people speaking up, they're changing the laws again. We saw what's going on in WA with the heritage land thing. He introduced it, people speaking up, and he's considering to cancel it. I haven't followed up on all the details, but so long you don't speak up, you agree with it. And it's time people speaking up. Even it's time for people at home, with family members, with neighbors, have conversations. What is your concern? Maybe you have an idea of something, think it's wrong, but the more people you talk, maybe there are different opinions and you realize you're on the wrong track. But it could be the other side, that you're on the right track and other people understand and on the right track too. You get confirmation from other people, and this was also, to my belief, why we had to wear masks and had this distance 1.5 meters. From us stopping to have conversations with other people, to raise our opinions and thinking it's not legal or stuff. Everyone just applied and was in fear. And it's not anymore the thing what we should do. We should stand up for our rights and speak out.
I was going to ask you what keeps you inspired to stay here up against such a corrupt system, but you kind of answered it when you said for the kids.
It's for the kids, and you get so much confirmation from others. Even from there's cooker watchers out there that follow you, they have titles to whatever. The narrative changes as well. They're not anymore against what we're doing. They're now actually frustrated that we don't do it efficient enough. So the feedback what we're getting, and for the right, you have to stand for the right what you have. So the future generation can live the rights what you experienced.
Yeah.
If you think, we grew up in the late 70s, in the 80s. The life was perfect. You had freedom, you couldn't walk out, you went with the bicycle, went to the neighbor or whatever, you throw your bike up. You could move freely. What has changed since the 80s till now? We got our economy is more efficient, so we should produce stuff quicker, more efficient, so it should be cheaper. The cost of living is more expensive and everything, so on one hand we saw advance, everything should be cheaper, but on the other hand everything is more expensive. And the main things are the legislation and rules what they're setting up to you. And it doesn't support it. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
Being over-regulated. It's not anymore in the peace and good order of the people. It's to make money for themselves. There's so much money laundering going on. They have to be made accountable. What we need is accountability. The system with our constitution and the laws, in principle, is really good. It's the best what we can wish for. We could maybe have a Bill of Rights, but the problem is no one gets made accountable. And we have so many royal commissions. All the time the constitutions, the institutions get made accountable, but never the person who actually does the crime. Or then just the tiny little person in the lower end to cover up for the proper people.
Yeah. So I hear what you're saying about, within this system, the need for accountability. And, there's a lot of us that have been aware of, sort of two worlds happening at the moment. So sort of the old world and then moving into the new world. And we know about New World Order stuff. But I wanted to ask you, because there's an other possibility for us, which is the new world that we create. So what would be your type of vision for a beautiful new world?
My wish would be to go back where we were in the 80s, 70s, 80s, with accountability. Something where people who break the law or make wrong laws get made accountable for it. You can't be above the law. The law itself can't break the law what it supports. And you have common sense. All what I wanted to do is go to work, pay taxes and come home, have my freedom. But you can't even do this anymore. It's so over-regulated. You have to think ignorance of the law is no excuse. But do you know how many laws are out there? How do we survive all the regulations, stay out of trouble? Based on natural law. But if you look at natural law, there's no definition. There's just ideologies what natural law is. Natural law is humanity, common sense, indignity and responsibilities. Maybe some people say the 10 Commandments from the Bible is natural law, but I can't even citate these ones. It's just don't hurt, do no harm, don't steal, and be nice to each other and respect each other. And if you stick to these principles, you mainly cover any legislation what is out there. So we have a responsibility to stick to the laws. But to my understanding, also the responsibility goes over to the judge, magistrate who charge you on the laws. This responsibility, ignorance of the law is no excuse, should be transferred to them as well. They have to consider any law what is available to make a judgment. And if they can't do this, then the jurisdiction is not justified. So we have to, instead making more, we actually have to reduce, making it simplified with laws. And until this is done, I don't know what else we can do. A lot of people say we have to fix the system. But when you realize the system is already fixed like the bed at a thing. So the system is already designated to go in one direction. Now we have to make the system accountable. That's what we have to do. We need accountability and responsibility.
Yep. So creating new systems that actually work.
And now it's the system that we have works perfectly fine. We maybe should have a Bill of Rights introduced to it and make a mechanism who makes them responsible for what they're doing. They're getting away with murder, literally with murder, what we experienced in the last 3 years. They're preaching one thing, making so much promises, and then they're denying it as soon as they're in power. They need to be made accountable for it. That's what we need.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Tobias, for sharing your experience here. And
Oh, there's much more to say, but yeah.
okay, thanks.